so impressive of an introduction. Good morning. It's really lovely to be here. The last time I was here in this region was November of 2013, but 15 years ago, I actually lived in Lithuania, so a close neighbor, and it was an amazing experience and a transformative experience. Today, I'm going to talk to you about what I think about the politics of experience. And some of what Jeff shared, you might hear me repeating, but let's get to it. I work at Frog, and it's important that I tell you that. So in 30 seconds, this is our history. We were birthed in Germany, and one of the big things that we often talk about in our history is the development of the Apple IIc system with Steve Jobs. And it took Apple's finances from a reasonable amount of millions of dollars to billions of dollars, and is a legendary part of our history. We're 45 years old as a company, and since that time, we've actually moved away from exclusively being in product design to also getting into software. These are some examples of some projects that we've worked on and been part of. Some are the big Microsoft and Disney levels of companies. But other things that we've done are partner with agencies and organizations in the social impact space. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that work today. But I should tell you where I came from first. No, I am not from Africa. I'm not from Rwanda, but I spent time in Rwanda. And it has definitely shaped my career and my views on what it means to be a designer today. I worked with a group of women. They were working with an invasive species. It's a plant that grows over the lakes and the rivers of the region. And if they don't extract it, it actually dries up those lakes and those rivers. And what that means is there's no food, and it means there's no water. So it's a pretty significant problem. They take the plant out of the water and turn it into a weaving fiber. And they make these handicrafts and these products. And they try to sell them. And my task was to participate as a designer, very exciting, to help them increase the sales of these handicrafts. And I was asked to develop a website. But the website doesn't increase their sales because nobody goes to it. Because in fact, the women in this village at the time had no electricity and had no computers. And so while this was a really nice idea from a design perspective, and it sounds like a really nice thing to say at a conference, that I helped change the life of a rural village in Africa, at the end of the day, this isn't doing a whole lot of good. So putting something out into the world that doesn't do any good isn't the best feeling. So I've been thinking a lot about this topic and the reality of why we're all here today. And I'm thinking a lot about what is our shared human experience so that I don't continue to put things out into the world that aren't right or aren't appropriate. So I'd like to consider a little experiment. So I need you to find a partner now, and probably the person next to you is the best. It's okay, we're human and we're allowed to talk to each other. In your partnership, I want to make sure that one of you has a piece of paper. I don't know if you remember what that is, but we still have paper, and a pen. Okay. Partner number one, figure out who that is. You are going to be the talker. You have to speak, okay? And you have to tell partner number two some information, and I'm going to get to what that is. Partner number two, you have to visualize, draw, sketch, put something on the paper. Partner number one is going to tell you what to draw on the paper because you're not allowed to look at the screen. You have to keep your head focused on that paper. Are you ready? Yes? Partner number 1, tell your partner number 2 to draw this. Okay, take a look. How did you do? Do okay? We're not finished. Now you need to swap roles. So the person who was talking is now going to draw and keep their eyes focused on that paper. And partner number 2, you're going to tell them to draw this. Okay, you might not be finished, but I only have so much time up here. Take a look at what you were trying to draw. So, now that you're all awake and you're with me, I want to talk to you about this experience. I have a theory as to why the first one was probably easier for you. And the reason it was easier for you is that we have a set of shared vocabulary. We all can talk about a circle, or a square, or a line, or an arrow. For the most part, we know how to talk about that with each other. In this case, we don't have words for this as much. They're harder, or they might be different depending on who you are and how you describe it. And I think in this world of user-centered, experience design, I'll use all the bingo words I can to introduce it, we have a set of principles, an ISO standard that tells us what we ought to focus on when we're thinking about a human-centered system. Lots of language in there about users, an explicit understanding of users. Users are involved throughout the whole process. We make sure it's very holistic. But today we live in a world where it's very challenging to know what people believe and how we are very different. This is a list, part of a list, of 66 ways that humans are different, depending on culture, depending on male-female. And this is taken from a list of items that come from an assessment on global competency in business. And so to get an explicit understanding of what somebody values in order to design for them is a real challenge, similar to trying to draw those kind of squiggly lines. I've titled my talk, The Politics, and politics is a really big word. We are in a world where there is a lot of politics. For today, I'm going to use this definition. It's activities aimed at improving someone's status or increasing power within an organization. And that's how I'm going to base what I'm going to talk to you about when it relates to politics. I'm also going to redefine the business we're in. This is a friend, colleague, Alan Chachanov. He's the editor-in-chief for Core 77, which is an online magazine and blog, and they do a whole lot of things. But his statement has stayed with me. We are no longer, in my mind, in an artifact business, a product, a service, a software. We're actually in the business of consequences. And that shapes what we ought to be thinking about when we're thinking about the human experience. Similarly, I'm also going to kind of define design again, because that's what we do, right? We redefine the things we do. And I'll say that design is not just about coming up with a solution, but it's actually figuring out the right way to look at a problem. So if that's the case, what's the right way to look at a problem when you're in the consequence business? There's a global view. I think that's an important thing for us, and Jeff has alluded to it this morning. If we don't really understand what's going on globally, it's very hard for us to think about the things that we're designing and putting into the world as it connects from that perspective. What I need to tell you about this picture is it comes from an article in the Washington Post a couple of days ago, where a bunch of researchers were looking at the United States and the citizens of the United States, and if they could locate the Ukraine. The red color on this map is the people who got the closest. I'm sure there's some people who were joking around, because I can't believe that they actually think that the Ukraine is in the US, but maybe. But there was a correlation between where somebody put the dot and whether they thought that the US should increase military action in the Ukraine. So the farther away they were in their locating, the more likely they were to respond on the survey that the US should invade the Ukraine and provide support. But this is only one part of it, right? We also need to have a local view. And I think all of you in this room understand what it means to talk to people, to connect with individuals in their real life experiences. And having a balance of both of those things helps us think about the scale and scope of the consequences that we're a part of or have the potential to be a part of. Frog has done a lot of programs. I'm going to talk about one because I think for me it is a case study of our own learning, of how to do problem solving, not solution finding, in order to actually deliver something that adds value. We were invited to partner with the Nike Foundation, and how many of you have heard of the Girl Effect? Ever seen viral videos? Okay, so the Girl Effect is an initiative by the Nike Foundation, along with other partners, to be able to see 250 million girls get out of poverty. And to get out of poverty by being able to be educated, being able to marry who they want to marry, live a life where they can elevate the situation that they're in. And this is some of the visual storytelling that was used to help people understand the differences between the situations for a girl and how it could shift. Small little clip of what we were tasked with, what we were looking at, and trying to understand this challenge of how do girls connect. One of the regions we were in was in a part of Nairobi known as the Kibera. It's a slum, and there's not really any infrastructure. It's a very chaotic place. And the ability for girls to actually connect and have systems in place, institutions in place. Think about the questions that you might ask as a young guy or a young girl, wanting to know things about, sexual and reproductive health. You know, those kinds of things that we assume everybody is talking about so kids know not to get pregnant and the like. Those kinds of things you need to have a place to talk about. And these girls did not necessarily have that. The other thing that we were challenged with is we knew that there were mobile phones. 3 out of 10 people have a mobile phone. However, in this case, if a young girl were to have a mobile phone under the age of 18 and not having graduated from high school, then she could be considered or viewed as potentially a prostitute. So the association of that artifact or that object with who she was makes a difference in what you actually seek to design. And because we're Frog and we work in a space of mobile technology, would be a very logical thing for us to think about adding into the mix, but perhaps not the best thing to start with. Our approach was to work with girls and not come in as the external designers and take over and come up with the plan, but actually invite the girls to be their own researchers and to be their own explorers. So week 1 was kind of fun. Being able to hang out, meet other people. They were actually given homework that led them in to week 2 that they had to interview. And be able to come back and tell the group what they had learned. So they interviewed somebody in their own community, another girl, to find out what her needs were. Does this sound familiar to the things that we do? Where we go out, we interview people, and we want to find out what they think about their world or what their needs are. We wanted to look at their creativity and wisdom and allow them to become the ideators, allow them to think about ideas and solutions that they could solve. So some of the things that they wanted to look at in their 3 groups, and there were 3 groups that focused on sexual and reproductive health, and how do you share that information with others. Another group was looking at things like financial literacy, and a 3rd group was looking at technology and journalism training. How can you teach people to use technology to tell the story so that other girls can learn about these things and share these things out? And so they were involved with the Post-it note practice. I hope Post-it note is one of the bingo words, because Post-it notes around the world. And then lastly, they got together, and one group really focused on more of the how would we report back and communicate using the mobile phone to give advice to a girl who's far away. And the other group was gathering together to figure out what is the best advice to give her. So there's 2 things. There's the technology and the critical thinking and the decision-making that has to happen. Long story short, these are the kinds of things that we began to hear from these girls. The idea that the things that they have in their minds and in their heads, they could actually translate them into something and make it meaningful for them, for their experience. We've done more work in piloting and testing this in other locations, using girl groups to be able to actually develop and design and get ideas out for their own community. But we got a lot of learning out of this, not because we designed a solution for them. But I'd like to talk to you about what the process was that helped us get forward. We know, I think every one of us in this room knows that design is an empowering thing. You get to make something and put it out into the world. And it allows people to act on the world, whether that is a Twitter statement being sent out, whether it's keeping in touch with your family on Facebook, or something much more intense like working in the medical field and being able to help people with health care. We know that it can change the world for the better. But it also got us asking some questions. How can we translate this design process that we have, this thing that is empowering for people? They can go through a process and develop things for themselves because it's relevant to them. And how can we turn it into something that would develop their skills or help them to share knowledge? How can we make this more about inquiry and leadership and problem solving for anyone at any time, anywhere? And how can we make a process that will scale to the last mile, so the farthest place? How can we make something that would work like that? We needed to find a way to do that, because what we learned from working with these girls was that a process would help to reduce, if you will, the politics. And so what we developed was something called the Collective Action Toolkit. There's a link up on the screen. If you want to download it, it's free. What I will say about it is we took all the designer words out of it. So this will not pass your bingo test because it won't have those designer words. We put together a framework to help people solve problems collectively as a group, to build new skills and to gain knowledge. And how many of you have worked in groups before? No one has ever worked in a group. How many of you have worked in a group? How many of you have found working in a group quite frustrating? At times, it's really hard to work in a group. It's okay to say so. And when we knew this, and the development of the toolkit helps figure out how you can work better in groups, because Our belief is that groups will make change, not individuals alone. So here's the framework. As you know, the design process is not linear, so it doesn't start at one place and end somewhere else. But how could we show that to somebody who's not a designer? We want to focus on the center as the key thing, always clarifying the goal. But beyond that, it kind of can move in a very organic fashion. Seeking new understanding is a lot like design research. Imagining new ideas is a lot like brainstorming. And making something real is a lot like prototyping. And so we've used this type of framework to help groups and organizations think about how they can use a process to clarify a goal and to see change actually come to pass. Since we've launched it, over 20,000 people, which may jump today, have downloaded the toolkit. These are the different areas where they have been using it, trying it, testing it. We have some languages that have emerged where people have translated it, so maybe Polish will be next, I don't know. And I think there's a lot of text on this screen, but the thing I want to say about the feedback has been doing and using the toolkit, and it looks kind of like this when you print it out and cut it and make it usable. All the activities inside help groups become able to have a voice. And so everything from a graduate student working with a high school, seeing as an enabler of voices, we have a voice, I actually get to talk and fit in. But we're not satisfied as frogs. We like to keep going and pushing the boundaries, and we had a great opportunity that basically challenged us with this question, to empower the next generation of leaders in this area. And we've been able to work with a group called Point B, and they're based in Myanmar. I don't know if you know anything about Myanmar, but it is an emerging democracy. It is coming into a place of its own where the ideas of being able to think for yourself and to speak what you feel, it has not always been a luxury. It's not always been available to them. And so this new Center for Community Engagement is a partnership between Point B, which is the nonprofit organization, a university, and Frog has been using the Collective Action Toolkit to help them actually develop a curriculum. And a curriculum that they can use this design process in how they teach the next generation of leaders in their country. And it focuses on learning through reflection, learning through collaboration, and learning through doing. Actually, that making part of our practice. You'll see that this is a very similar scene in many of our, perhaps your proposals to clients. You show the journey and the process that you go through. In the same way, they are using a similar process. But what I really like about it is they're not relying on technology or all the things that we think have to be in place before we can act. It's start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. And the reason this is so valuable and important to keep in mind is this is their school. The most technology they have is a whiteboard and Post-it notes. It's questionable if you're going to get an internet connection or have a mobile phone at this point. But that doesn't mean you can't design change. And so these students and these teachers are looking to develop how they can actually make changes in the social infrastructure of their culture and communities in this region. And then after a year, they're going to open source the curriculum so that other schools in the region can develop, get teacher training, and think about how the process that we use every day and take for granted can change their life. So here's some shots of working with Post-it notes. Some of the teachers getting trained using the toolkit as a foundation. So I started this talk asking, I'm going to talk to you about the politics of experience. In simplest form, I think there are many things that we can do in the world, and they are layered, and they have nuances, and they have things that can be used for good, used for bad. But to be aware of the fact that we are in a consequence business allows us to think a little bit more strategically about what it is that we do. So if this is the definition that I started with, I'm going to change it yet again. I think that what we're involved with are activities aimed at helping others improve their status or increase their power within their world. And that we need to be mindful human beings, understanding a global and local perspective, and being aware that the process that we have actually can impact and change people's lives. You can download the toolkit, try it out for yourself. Love to hear your feedback if you use it with clients or with groups, student groups, universities, whatever. Thank you so much for listening and coming today.